Eliot here with ePark Fishing. Today we're going to be doing a review of the Canfish FishingcamX by Chasing. It's an underwater fishing camera that you can use for lure fishing, bottom fishing, and float fishing. So let's take a look at how it works real quick. Then I'm going to go through my experience using the camera, where I captured bluegill, bass, and trout strikes and reactions. And then finally I'm going to give a rating of this camera out of 100. So if you like what you see, make sure to look at the link in the description for 15% off this product. And keep in mind that I kept this review as fair as I could, because I don't want to recommend anything to you guys that I don't believe in myself. Alright, so here's how it works. You charge it up wirelessly on this base, and it takes about an hour to charge. It's got a single on-off sliding switch, and that's the only button on the camera. So it connects via Wi-Fi to your phone through the app, which is called Canfish. So once it's connected, you're going to get a live feed of the camera as long as it's not fully submerged. If it does get fully submerged, if you're doing like lure fishing or bottom fishing, it will keep on recording internally even though the Wi-Fi is going to disconnect because Wi-Fi can't go through water. So once it's back above the surface, it'll reconnect to the app, and then you can download those files to your smartphone and later put them on your computer. If you want to do float fishing, then you're going to get a live feed of the top-down action, which is super cool, and that's what I used it for most of the time. And use this float ring to achieve that, which just slides on. It's kind of like a little donut. So I guess you can also use this thing for night fishing, which is really cool, but I haven't had a chance to do that yet, and it's got this green light that attracts the fish. It's funny because the camera itself can attract the fish as well, but you'll see that a little bit later in the video. So it's got these two holes, and that's where you're going to connect your line. And I used 20-pound braid with a uni knot attached to a clip swivel, and on the other end I used just a clip with a clear leader to a hook. Doesn't that look perfect for bluegill? Speaking of, let's get to this underwater footage of bluegill. This is my first time using it, and you can see me put it on the float circle because I was going to do some float fishing, and I was a little bit worried about casting it at first, so I just kind of dropped it down and I sped it up a bunch. There weren't really any fish that were active because it was like 95 degrees. Wasn't really the best time to try it out, but this was the very first cast I did with it, and you can see the worms start dropping down, and a bluegill actually came up on the very first cast and took a sniff, and I never would have known that if I didn't have the camera. So then I let it float around, and they were just not active and not feeding. So I came back another day, and they were a lot more active because I came in the morning. And here's some footage of the very first one taking a bite, and I couldn't get the hook set. So I kind of struggled with the hook set at first because that bobber has some weight to it, so you have to really set it through that thing. And you can see all the algae in the water, and I think the camera actually did a really good job with the algae. So there's another bite, and I missed the hook set, and I was using smaller worms. There, he really took it that time and still didn't get the hook set. Surprised I didn't lose the worm. And oh, here we go. Here's one that I actually got hooked, and you can see the unhooking there. So when you're casting this thing, you want to be careful to stop it before it hits the water like that, and that way it won't tangle up. It'll just drop straight down. And I used some weight as well to get the worm to fall down there. You can see these guys just chowing down. I was kind of feeding him at certain points, but you got to really wait for him to take it. And then when you set the hook, you just got to set it through the camera. Got another one, and I was just catching one after another at some points, and at other points I was kind of just looking at them, and it's just really cool to see the footage. It's pretty clear, considering that the water was not clear. It's HD, so it's not 4K or anything, but you don't really need that. And there's another one, and got some pretty cool footage of me reeling him in there. And that was a big bluegill. So I really like the casting footage too. Really gives it some action. And this was funny because some of these fish were going for the weight, and this guy just grabbed the worm and stole it, and that guy grabbed the worm and stole it. So I went through a bunch of red worms here. I tried hooking them so they wouldn't take it, but they were pretty smart. And there's There's some more casting, and you can see there are all those weeds. I was trying to get around these weed beds, and that's exactly where the bluegill were hanging out. But they were just taking this bait. And then see this guy going for the bare hook. Some of these guys were really almost hooked on just a gold hook. And here they are munching up again. And they're going for the hook, they're going for the weight. Bluegill are just really, really curious about everything. Here's another one that I almost had. And there's another. So I missed a bunch of fish here. But that doesn't really matter because I was just trying to get the footage. Here, I finally hooked that one. That was cool. That was a really big bluegill. It's probably like a 7 or 8 incher. So here's a couple worms on the hook because I didn't want them to steal it as much. And that did not even help. They were just grabbing them. And look at how much of those things wriggle. Those night crawlers you get at the store do not move like that. So this is much better. Has so much action. And they're just going for it, getting hooked. So that was 4 bluegill that I hooked on the camera. So then what I did, I was kind of messing around trying to get the worm closer to the camera to get clear footage. And I just made it a little bit smaller of a leader. And I put a split shot right by the hook. And you can see they're coming up really close. And with all that algae, that was helpful to have them a little closer. Look at this guy go looking at the hook in the split shot and turning around, and he was kind of working like a little fly. And this guy like almost gets hooked on the bare hook. That was crazy. And the weight. They love like gray and gold and anything shiny. So I did get a ton of this bluegill footage, and it looks really nice and clear. I really love the float because it's pretty sensitive, so you can see it bumping up and down. So here's another one with the bare hook. It's just crazy. It would have been really cool if I hooked one with the camera on a bare hook. This was actually one of the crazier moments because these fish were just going wild for that little chunk of worm. Couldn't figure out how to get it off the hook. And I really wanted to get one more, is why I kept doing that. I just kept leaving it out there. I was watching the live feed, so I was trying to set the hook on him. Then I just put a giant ball on there, and this guy just taking off a chunk, taking it home and grabbing another one. It's like a little vending machine for him. Yeah, this was really cool footage with the camera. So I think the float fishing was amazing. All right, so check it out. We're getting to the bass portion here, and I tried to throw out a rapala, a baby bass rapala, and it was just really hot. The fish weren't really that active, but I wanted to see what lures looked like, and they really look nice on this camera. So if you're trolling on a boat or something, that would probably work perfect. But it wasn't really getting anywhere, so I didn't try it for that long. So I switched it up to the float rig, and I threw out a green pumpkin Senko. So really, really popular bait for bass. And I was trying to give it a little bit of action because usually they like a little bit of that action and motion. So it was just sitting there still, and you can see a bass on the right there come up and just take a look at it. Didn't look like a very big bass, but without the motion, bass are just not that interested in a bait like that. So the bluegill were, though, for sure. There was one that tried to take it right here, just grabbed the end of it, and that was pretty funny. They'll pretty much bite anything, and these two guys look like they're trying to figure out how to take that thing down. It's pretty great. So I decided to switch up to just a big night crawler, because that way I didn't have to give it any action and the bass would just come get it. But also the bluegill were very interested, and they just stole the worm right there. So I switched it up to a bottom rig in a different area, and I was just scooting it along the bottom, and you can see a bass just pop up right there. And this was pretty funny because you can see this bluegill, it's kind of going upside down, but the bluegill actually scared that bass away. That was a huge bluegill. So here's another cast, and you can see that it really rotates a lot when you're bottom fishing. Here's a bluegill grabbing it, and I hooked that guy. but it rotates and it kicks up a lot of sediment, and that really clouds it up and makes it kind of not the best picture. So I decided to rig it up a little bit differently, and I came back the next morning right at sunrise, and I took some fly line, some indicator line, and some little stick-on floats and a bobber, and that keeps it propped up off the bottom and stabilized. And I used a number 4 bait holder hook and a giant worm. I mean, look at that thing. It's like the size of my finger, and you've got to hand dig them if you want to get that size, because they are not that big from the store. And that's what the bass are really interested in, are the huge night crawlers. So you can see how stable it is like that. It really worked well. So that kind of opened my eyes, and there are so many different ways you could use this camera. It's crazy. So here's a little bluegill came up and took half of that worm right away. And then a bigger bluegill came up and started taking a look, but look at the picture on that. I mean, it's just so stable, centered. The lighting is just perfect. And this guy comes up to look at the camera, and as it was doing that, there was a bass in front of it that was cruising right toward the worm, just a little further up. So I started moving that worm, and I was moving the camera, and the bass actually came up and tried to eat the camera. Right, coming up, right there. That was the bass trying to eat the camera. In slow motion, you can see its mouth. So that was a really funny moment. So I scooted it up so it would see the worm. And that was a pretty decent bass. That was probably, 2-pounder, maybe 2.5. And I was just scooting that worm and then letting the worm do the action. And bass started coming up, looking at it, and grabbed it. And that was so exciting. I let it turn, and then I set the hook, and it was going crazy. It went nuts, and it actually spit the hook out. So I didn't keep it on, but it was on there for a solid few seconds. You can just see him gulp it, just gulp. And then here's where he threw the hook. Just threw it, and that was kind of a bummer that I didn't land it, but it's all good. So here's a bluegill coming up and looking at it, and this guy didn't get hooked, but it was really nice footage. He's got the golden color on him, and then his little buddy came up to see what was going on, and just took that worm. And so I switched it up to a float, and I casted it by these weed beds, and you can see my reaction here to the live feed.
You guys can't handle all that. Let the bass come take it. No.
It's really wild to be able to just watch the live feed and see what's going on. And it's actually really helpful too. So here's a bass coming up. That's a pretty nice sized bass. And I really thought he was going to take it, but he never ended up taking it. But that's okay, because I got that other one hooked on camera, and that was way exciting. Alright, so here we go with the trout portion of the video. And I've got a drop shot here about a foot below the surface with the mouse tail. It's like a soft plastic, and you just can't get any action with those soft plastics with the bobber, so I switched it to a worm. And you can see I landed really near this active trout, but it just was not looking up that high. It was kind of doing its own thing, and then I just let it drift with the wind, and there was this huge trout just once again just sitting down at the bottom. And when it's hot like this, it was probably 85, 90 degrees, and it's pretty shallow. They're gonna go down to those deep holes, which you can see on the right there. And the camera is really useful for spotting holed up fish that I wouldn't have been able to see otherwise, because I was probably 20, 30 yards away. So here's another one. I was just to the right of that pocket, and you can see how much deeper it is on the left there. And the fish are just kind of hiding out down there. This guy came up and took a look at it. And then this big fish came up, and I really thought it was going to grab the worm, but it was just under it, and it grabbed the drop shot weight. So that was pretty exciting. So they were kind of active. I mean, they were pretty active. So you can see here how the color adjusts. I sped it up, and see how the color's changing? The camera does a really good job of equalizing out when the colors are not ideal. So here we're coming right over that pocket. And this was pretty perfect, except it was just too high up. So when you're bobber fishing, I mean, a lot of the time when I see people bobber fishing and I'm fishing a drop shot, I'm gonna outfish them by like 2 to 1, because you can see these fish are just down there, and that's where they like to hang out. And there's a big guy roaming around. But yeah, they just like to hang out on the bottom, and if you're not deep enough, you're not gonna have a chance, because they might come up and take a look. That guy almost grabbed it, and then you can see in the slow motion how many fish there are when it turns up here. There's so many. They were all in one spot. The whole rest of that pond was completely dead. But in that one spot, look at how many there are. So this is where I switched to a bottom rig, because I was like, I gotta get down there. And you can't really see very well, but I did get a bite right there, and you can see the silhouette of those fish. But I didn't end up hooking one, which I'm totally fine with, because that footage was just phenomenal. Alright, so now it's time to give this camera a rating out of 100. So I've got a couple different categories here. The first one is picture quality, and I'm going to give it a 95%. It's not 4K, but I didn't really expect it to be, and it does a really good job in murky water as well as lower light. And one thing I didn't mention is that green light for night fishing will come on automatically if the light is low, so that's pretty cool. So next category is battery life, and I'm going to give it an 80%. The only reason I'm giving it a lower score is because it says on the box it has 238 minutes of battery life, but I used it 7 or 8 times, and the battery lasts about 90 minutes, whether you're filming or not. That's still pretty good, but since they claim a lot higher, I gotta take points off there. For lure fishing and float fishing, I'm gonna give 100% for that category. That camera is just excellent for either of those purposes, and there's no problem keeping a lure or the bait in frame. All right, so the last thing I'm gonna review here is the app, and I'm only gonna give that a 70% because most of the time it worked really well, but it was frustrating because I had a file get corrupted. I guess that's super rare, and that can happen with GoPros too, but I did have some issues with the camera connecting, and I had to reinstall the app twice. However, none of the footage was lost, so that was good because the camera keeps on recording on the SD card. So the average of all those categories was 87%. So that's my overall rating is 87%, and that's pretty darn good if you're curious to see what's going on while you're trolling, lure fishing, or float fishing, and I would definitely recommend giving it a shot. I really look forward to using this camera in a variety of different ways, and my brain is just popping thinking of all the different ways I could use it. So don't forget to check the link in the description, and there's also a discount code for 15% off that's only for this channel. And if you like these kind of videos, these underwater bite videos, don't forget to subscribe and share these videos. That really helps out the channel, and throw a like on the video as well while you're at it, and I will see you next time. Thank you for watching.
Got it. Oh yeah. Nice bass.